ESPN dropped a new 7-round mock draft. So, what I want to do on today's episode is run through all the picks they made for the Broncos and give you my reaction to them. Let's start in round number 1, where Cam Ward is the first player off the board, no surprise. Abdul Carter to the Browns, Shedeur Sanders, a Giant. Travis Hunter joins forces with Drake May, Mason Graham helping the Jags defensive line. And now we start to see a few players that Denver could have some interest in. Tet McMillan, the Arizona receiver, off to a different AFC West team. Fast forward to number 10, Ashton Jeanty, who I would love for Denver to get. He is off the board to Chicago. And now we inch our way closer to 20. However, some more bumps along the way. Tyler Warren and Colston Loveland both going top 15. So you could argue the top 3 draft targets for the Broncos don't even come within striking distance of them. The Cardinals add to their defense with the FBS sack leader, Mike Green. Nick Emanwari, the safety from South Carolina, I would have more interest in if Talanoa Hufanga was not just signed. Matthew Golden is the second receiver taken in this draft class. That's worth noting because his stock has shot up the last couple of weeks. Malachi Starks, the second safety off the board, going to Tampa Bay. And then, with the 20th pick in the 2025 NFL Draft, the Denver Broncos select Luther Burden, wide receiver, Missouri. We have not talked about Burden a ton on the channel. And one reason is I don't really want the Broncos to draft Luther Burden. But that's always a really, I wouldn't say bad opinion to have pre-draft, but it's just not a fun one because these guys only get drafted once and no one wants to hear a negative Nancy. So let's just get to know Burden a little bit better. The first thing you got to know about the former 5-star recruit is what the heck happened in 2024? How do you go from 1,200 yards and 9 touchdowns to 600 yards and 6 touchdowns? Just is yardage slashed in half? That is the biggest question that scouts and GMs are trying to answer. A lot of people are pointing towards the rocky offense Mizzou had, the injuries they had at the quarterback position, and all that is fine and dandy, but if you're taking a guy 20th overall, the hope and belief is they are so talented that a few bumps in the road don't take a huge hit on their production. So I always like to do a little complimentary sandwich when it comes to these prospects. So we don't just completely gaslight them, but we also don't spend the whole time just, shitting on them. So, Luther Burden, pro I've got for him, 58% of his yards over the past 2 seasons came after the catch. So if you are looking for someone who's a playmaker, who can catch the ball, turn upfield, make guys miss, it can put up an awesome highlight reel, he's your man. The athletic ability is undoubted. It's why he was a huge-time recruit for Mizzou, and it showed on the field. Now, his pro is also kind of his con. It's like the Michael Scott, right? One of my biggest weaknesses is I spend too much time carrying or whatever it was, and it's also one of my biggest pros. So, con, 75% of receptions came within 10 yards. You're going to get a lot of yards after the catch if you get the ball quickly and there's room to run. Whereas, I don't think it's fair to say a knock for him would be, oh, he barely got in a yak. Well, if you're getting all of your yards by running down the field and catching it in the end zone, you don't get the opportunity to get yards after the catch. Now, I think you guys might find this stat interesting. So I've got 58% of his yards coming after the catch. For reference, Tet McMillan, 35% over the past 2 seasons. Ultimately, this is not my preferred choice at pick number 20. I just feel that when going round 1, sure, at 20, you're not going to have maybe your first, second, or even possibly your third or fourth pick because you're later down in the queue. But I would like to avoid someone that I don't want to say is a one-trick pony, but for a wide receiver, I didn't see enough of an extensive route tree and enough usage in different spots and different roles to warrant a first-round draft pick. So if I were the GM, I would pass on Luther Burden. But let me know how you would grade this pick. If you are watching the draft and Roger Goodell walks up to the podium and says this name, what's the instant reaction going to be? Is it an A grade, a B grade, a C grade? I'd give it a C. I just don't think it's a very good wide receiver class. And Golden is my preferred option, but he went before Denver, so nothing you can do there. I just feel that this is something we'll look back on and go, oh, that probably wasn't a very good draft pick. So sure, you can mark me down as a doubter or a hater. Moving on, let's look at some of the other picks in round number 1, guys that Denver could have gotten that Matt Miller passed on, and then we'll just kind of sprint through the rest of this 7-round mock draft. So let's look at 21 through 25. I would have preferred Omarion Hampton, for example, at 22, going to the Chargers, to the Broncos at number 20. Calvin Banks, Josh Simmons, Maxwell Harrison, just not big enough positions of need for a first-round pick. You don't need a quarterback like Jackson Dart. Derek Harmon out of Oregon, I would have preferred that selection over Burden at 20 as well. Then you got another defensive lineman, Shemar Stewart, an athletic freak, but very little production in 3 seasons for the Aggies. And to round out the first round, you got a corner and a pair of pass rushers going to the Chiefs and the Eagles. So 2 players that Denver passed on that I think would have been better selections. Now let's check out the other picks made rounds 2 through 7. So after going with Burden in round 1, Miller went with Quinshon Judkins, running back out of Ohio State in the middle of round 2. There are a lot of good running backs in this class. I think we've all heard that now at this point. So a little bit of background information on part of the Thunder and Lightning combination for the Buckeyes that helped them win the national championship. Judkins, incredible at Ole Miss. He was the SEC Freshman of the Year, 2-time All-SEC player, first team, transfers to Ohio State, gets a lot of NIL money in that transfer as well. But he is someone that plays with power. If you're looking for like a speedy scat back guy, I would look a different direction. Now, his 4.48 40-yard dash indicates he's not a slowpoke. Like, he's got some good wheels to him for a running back. But he definitely leans on his power. And that's the first pro I have for him. The con is, in 5 of the 9 Big Ten games this past season, he averaged less than 4 yards a carry. Now, he did lead Ohio State in rushing this past season with 1,060 yards and 14 touchdowns. The guy had 45 career touchdowns. It's hard to do that by accident. You can try and put it all on the offensive line or say he's just like a Mike Tolbert goal line merchant, but 45 touchdowns, it requires some skill to do that. Now, I'm also old enough to remember when a friend of the program, Monty Ball, he led the FBS in touchdowns, and we know that did not quite age as well as we all would have hoped. So Judkins, I think, is an awesome power back who has a nose for the end zone. He's tough to bring down. He's got some good speed to his game. Receiving ability, just not, I wouldn't say there, but not highlighted during his time in college. And I don't expect that part of his game to really peek through or poke through once he gets to the pros. Overall, this would be a solid pick for a running back in round number 2. I could really warm up to it. I would prefer Caleb Johnson or Omarion Hampton. But if you decide to wait for a running back until round 2, there's a chance those guys may not be there, and I won't be upset if that's the selection. On to round number 3. After going offense the first 2 rounds, it's defensive player. Defensive lineman Shamir Turner out of Texas A&M. There's a chance some of you watching right now are wondering, where do I know that name from? Not for good reasons. Shamir Turner, really good player, athletic build, all that stuff, right? Has nice frame. He can move around the defensive line. That's not why he's going to go later in the draft. He'll probably fall in the draft because he's a bit of a hothead. I wish I could put the clip in here, but YouTube copyright laws. When A&M was playing Ole Miss, there was an instance, and you can look it up and it won't be hard to find, where an Ole Miss lineman was getting up after kind of laying down on Turner, and Turner's reaction was to just punch him in the balls. So that's one of many 15-yard penalties, which, by the way, that was an ejection that he has gotten in his career. So if a coach can find a way to tame him a little bit and pull the throttle back on punching in the crotch, you might have something here. But if you don't, you're going to have someone that is probably not going to be in the league for very long. We're We're going to look at the day 3 selections in this mock draft, but really quickly, help us continue to grow as a channel this offseason. Going all the way back to January 1st of 2025, we have gained 2,848 new subscribers. It's an incredible accomplishment, and I'm so grateful to those of you that have hit that sub button. But if you haven't yet, it would mean a ton to me if you could click subscribe down below. Let's run through rounds 4 through 7 here. I don't expect you all to know a lot of these names. We'll start with Jake Majors, the center out of Texas. He was a 4-year starter for the Longhorns. He was actually, I think, the top guard recruit when he went to Austin. He does not have incredible arm length, which might sound a little bit silly, but teams really value that. However, I like the positional pick. Luke Wattenberg is the only question mark, I think, on this starting lineup. Bowles, Miners, McGlinchey are here for the long haul. Powers, this is probably a make or break season for him. Wattenberg is a bit of a short-term fix, right? You lost Cushenberry in free agency. You didn't want to spend a lot last year, so you went in-house with a guy like Wattenberg. I like the idea of bringing in some more center competition, especially because after the Chiefs game, Alex Forsythe might not be able to be trusted. Let's move on to round 6. They do not have a 5th-round draft pick. And in round 6, they go with tight end out of South Carolina, Joshua Simon. He played 6 seasons of college football, so a bit of an older guy. 4 of them came at West Virginia, 2 of which came this past season for the Gamecocks. The upside for him is his pass-catching ability. That is what he really brings to the table. He's okay against the run when it comes to blocking. I never have high expectations for tight ends and run blocking. But for round 6, I like the idea of planting the seeds a little bit for a pass-catching tight end, given how big of a weakness that was for this team last year. Ingram on a 2-year contract does not get in the way of you adding a new, younger tight end. I expect the Broncos to find another tight end in this draft. We have 2 more picks to look at, so don't go anywhere. But make sure you visit our friends over at Fanatics. They're having a huge clearance sale. Some things are 70% off, some things not as much, but these sales are fluid. I don't want you to put it off because if you decide in a few days, you know what, maybe I will get myself a new Broncos shirt, a polo, a sweater, a hat, and that sale may not be as beneficial as it was a few days ago. So go to chatsports.com/DEN hat. I put that link in the comments and description of today's video. Let's round it out with a pair of 6th-round draft picks. In round 6, it is cornerback Bilhal Kone. I'm not going to try and pass it off as if I know Western Michigan DBs very well, but I did some research because that is my job. And Kone started off at Iowa Community College, then went to Indiana State, then transferred to Western Michigan. And the 2 words that come up the most when researching and learning about him is he is tall, 6'1", and he's got some good fluidity to himself as well. He's likely looked at as a late day 3 guy because he played at Iowa Community College, Indiana State, and Western Michigan. So just the lack of competition, it's just not going to generate a lot of eyeballs on him. And then finally, for our last 2 picks of this mock draft, we've got, after Kone, you've got Joyner out of Minnesota, an edge rusher. So not a lot other than he led the team in sacks 2 years ago. He's been there for a handful of seasons, and that's pretty much the rundown on Joyner. I wish I had more information, but we just kind of know that these late day 3 prospects are not players that tend to garnish a ton of attention. But I still think it's never a bad idea to add to your pass rush because it's a cornerstone position in the NFL. So why not bring some more bodies in at that spot in case an injury pops up? You can never have enough pass rushers in the National Football League. That's going to do it for us on today's episode. I really appreciate everyone for tuning in. As always, we end our episodes with Name a Random Blank. It's just a fun way to keep things a little light and keep things moving during the dog days of the off season, which aren't quite here yet, but they will be before we know it. So name a random Big Ten school. I figured since we ended with Minnesota, I'm going to count down from 3. Let's see if you and I say the same school. 3, 2, 1, Purdue. Let me know if you said Purdue, and if not, enjoy the rest of your day.